everyone. We are opening this first session for the World Forum Responsible Economy. This roundtable is going to deal with a strategic topic. Is Europe a continent on the wrong track in a rapid changing world? I mean, it's one way to create innovation, creating strategic surprises. It helps you to take a step back and find out which trend you want to follow. But there's an adverse effect, the resistance to change. It might create isolation, misunderstanding. I mean, we might create opportunities because of being out of time. Is Europe on the wrong track? So Europe has a sense of responsibility which is more important than the rest of the continent. It protects the values better than anywhere else. It's a continent which is devoted to climate warming, a reduction of GHG, the RGPD, to protect personal data, etc. But next to that, we can see that Europe is has to face major problematics in terms of sovereignty and competitivity. That's where we might think about a counter-cycle. The growth of Europe is below the rest of the world, and there's also the disindustrialization, which is a heavy consequence as a result. We've multiplied the strategic dependency, and as we are the most protective continent, I mean, we can see the rise of populism everywhere, which is a few figures. We can see that the GDP is lagging behind if you compare it with the United States, $75,000 per American, when the Europeans are at 40,000. Our currency cannot rival or compete against the dollar. Defense-wise, General, you'll tell us, but we are relying on the Americans and of NATO, which might not be a bad thing, but this is reality. And we can see that EU doesn't file a lot of patents, 10 to 12% for the rest of the world, and the Americans file 20%, and Asia the rest. And in terms of R&D, Europe invests 350 billion euros per day, 600 billion for the US. They're at 3%, and China is at 500 billion euros. So we've got to have the means of our ambition, and we realize that the game is played at a higher level than us with China, Russia, and the United States, and the general context is not very good. Our political model is fragile in Europe as far as governance is concerned, and Germany is also having a good time, which are not very good signals to face the heavy weather that we have to face. I've got an exceptional panel with us, and we're going to start with you, General. You are General Bertrand Toulouse. You've got a very heavy. You are the commander of the territorial force, and this force will implement the operational contract of the Land Army, 77 forces, and the great majority of the 77,000 soldiers present in this. You're from Saint-Cyr. You served in the special forces, the elite parachutist regiment, and you've been working also on intelligence in time of peace. Before coming to Lille, you were the boss of the commandment of the COS, and you were also deputy director of the military intelligence. With you, General, we're going to deal with the heavy weather we're going through. And the question I would like to ask you, this model of Europe going on the right way, is that a good thing to be, or when we see the multiple crises we have to face? When I was younger, I read the book of Mr. Paul Kennedy, Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, in 1987, which is a book which is quite interesting to know what phase of a cycle we're at. And there was a thesis saying that the major powers go through time and cycles with a beginning which can only be economic, and after decades or centuries, we spread our action on different fields. And at the end of the cycle, when the powers were going down, the last place where there was some superiority was in the military field, because we had to make the model last through the use of force, because we could no longer do it through economy development and so on. So aren't we at this stage now? I wonder, in the economy we have now. His thesis was about the US at the end of the Cold War. What's very interesting is to see how the United States recreated the whole decade afterwards to have a digital revolution, which promoted them at the first place, as we thought we would be at the end of a cycle. So for Europe, being at the end of the cycle, we should have the same type of recreation as the United States did. As far as the deterioration is concerned in the military field, I mean, we can cope with that because we've got this lure of the NATO. If tomorrow there was a war in Europe, we could think that we would have the support of NATO. 57% of the expenditures as far as the armament is concerned. The power of the Western Bloc is still very important against our competitors, including the states in this bloc, with the perspective of a world now which would be a Trumpian one, where the US would do another choice. We might then find ourselves isolated. But in NATO, 68% of the forces are Americans, European 24-25%. What's interesting is that even with that, I mean, we spend in Europe 3 times more than the Russians do, and 1.5 times more than the Chinese do. So for purchasing power comparison, the Chinese spend 1.5 times more than we do, and the Russians are at the same level as we are if we compare the purchasing power. So and the European strategic themes are the key, or were the leading elements until the end of the 1990s, and the fall of the Berlin Wall was done by the individuals. I mean, it's not due to a war happening. I mean, the Eastern Berliners fled the country, and we had a very big win on our basic value, on our base of value.
And I think that if we look at what Fukuyama has predicted, we were really nice with the 90s, with the UN, and it was somewhat a good solution, but we realized also that that was not what was going to save the world. But what happened is that there was then the counterterrorism, the terrorist threat and counterterrorism in 2001, when the US switched to that model for 10 years. Even in France, we were withdrawing from that, saying that it couldn't be the key to understanding the world, where we had an opposition between the Western world and Islam. And what we didn't realize at the time was that beyond terrorism, we understood that there was somewhat an opposition to the global world order, and that's where we were off. We thought that our model, the Western model, was better than that. And then when you had a rise of power starting 2005, 2010, we also thought, well, no, that's not possible with Russia. What I note, however, is that beyond the way that we covered it, more or less, we see in all the French strategic document, what was written by the Ministry of Interior, the White Book by the Ministry of Defense, this is a reality. We see the power, the rising powers, the rising opposition. This is something that we've realized. And what's interesting is that in terms of concept, we see the competition, opposition and fight that is now that has now replaced the war and peace dichotomy. And this is something that we see everywhere, and we hear the same vocab at NATO, which means that the Western world is now understanding this dialectic. And today, what's at stake, and I'll stop there, is that we are clearly in a strategic phase where there's a lot of opposition. And what we should do is that we shouldn't miss this opposition, because this is the world we're living in. And this dispute, this questioning means that we should deter our opponents from fighting, from going to the battlefield. We should do our best to try and reinvent ourselves in this period of dispute, to win war before war. This is the vocab that you hear, in order to avoid this old school fight, combat situation. Right now, we are fighting against Russia. Not entirely sure that we'll go much further in this fight, but it could happen. What should we do right away, right now, in order to react, to respond? Well, when you're purely reacting, you have survival. You're in survival mode. Right now, we need to transform our military tools, our stance, our positionings, our innovations, etc. Then there are heavier questions that we need to ask ourselves in the short or mid-term. But I think that this is something that a lot of other players will probably talk about later on. Thank you, General. We're going to move on. And now, Joséphine Staron, I'd like to give you the floor. You're in charge of international relations and studies at Sinopia. You have a PhD in politics. You are familiar with European affairs. I'd like to ask you a question. Right now, the period that we're in, and this counter time that we're about to get into with the arrival of Donald Trump back in power, what is the strategy that we'll have, and what understanding can we have in Europe of Trump's arrival? How is it going to be disruptive for us in the short term? Well, I could give you a few keys to understand the situation, but I can't anticipate and tell you this is exactly the scenario that's going to happen, and these are the consequences that Trump's election are going to have on Trump, because he's really unpredictable. Now, we know the 2016 version of Donald Trump. We don't know yet the 2024 version, so we must remain cautious. However, what we do know is that the United States have for quite some time now, be they Republican or Democrats, have had a tendency to protect America. They have this protectionism policy. We've seen it with the Inflation Reduction Act as a good example of it, which is extremely costly for us as European citizens. That is extremely costly also for European industries, including in the green energy sector, but especially in the electric automotive sector. And this is something that we've seen for quite some time now. And that's not something that only Trump has done, be it Kamala Harris or Trump now. The Europeans knew that we were going to have to start thinking differently. We can't become protectionist again, but at least we know that the world is calling up onto itself and protecting itself more than ever. And we knew that the EU was going to have to revise its standards, its values, also in a way. Its values, yes, yes, Alexandre, you said it at the beginning. Europe was offbeat and was hurt by several setbacks. Europe had was a peace project, was out of sync. It's a human project that was organized based on economic and cooperation-related challenges. Initially, it was about the energy, but then it extended. And initially, the fact that we were out of sync was unavoidable. That's exactly what we were looking for. We wanted this ideal constitution, ideal set of countries that was out of sync. Europe may be out of sync once more, but mainly because it didn't really understand the timing in which we were working, which is not what we had in the 1980s or the 90s or the end of the Cold War with globalization, capitalism, etc., etc. So for the past 20 to 30 years, actually, Europe could have understood that the world was evolving, was switching towards what we call a multi hub. But what's happening is that we have different polarities where everyone is trying to make the most of the situation through conflicts to impose their vision of the world, of the economic world, of the social order to the rest of the world. And up until now, the US, with their vision, which we mainly share, were the dominating power. But we now know that the last BRICS summit in Russia showed it. This is a good example of that. Amongst tens of them, the BRICS, extended BRICS, which account for 45% of the global population, now have decided to adopt a new financial system that was alternative to the SWIFT system that Russia has been taken out of since the invasion in Ukraine. And we clearly see that on this type of example, Russia, China, and their allies are able to come up with plans together in order to counter the Western world's plans. And it's working. And it worked on a certain number of projects and issues and what the Europeans must do now. And they're already doing it in a way. But from the Europeans' standpoint, Europe is understanding that being out of sync is not necessarily right now the right solution, and that they must factor in different elements, including demography, because we don't talk about demography enough in Europe and the Western world in general. Let me give you one figure. In 2050, the estimates are that 450 million inhabitants out of 8 billion inhabitants will be in Europe. So when we know that we can't capitalize on the number of people, we'll be outnumbered. So we will have to work on our assets. Our internal market is our main asset. It's always been the case. And this internal market is currently challenged, including by the different Biden regulations.
And by the changing of the world and its multipolarity, which challenges our values, opening, free exchange, loyal competition, but doesn't include the notion of European preference, commercial preference. These are notions which are starting to appear, and when we see the results of the national elections throughout Europe, I mean, this is shared by the European citizens, but as far as the governments are concerned and as far as the European institutions are concerned, we are still got barriers stopping us to take it further. And the risk today is either to continue in this unruly liberalism, or to switch to protectionism, sovereignistic, but in an extreme way, and we don't have the resources for that. The force of Europe to be out of sync and on the beat was to create its right path, a third path in a polarized world. We've got to find this creativity. Europe can do it. It's got the factual resources to do so. Still missing the determination, maybe determination and crisis, because Europe changes under crisis. We've got the American model, which is a strong one, regulating quite strictly. It's got its power thanks to the dollar, its laws, its extraterritoriality of the system, but it's strong on an economic point of view, a technological point of view. We're okay as far as regulations are concerned, but as far as the economic, industrial, and technological resources, we don't have enough champions and so on. So what is the solution? It's the Draghi report, but nobody wants it. That should be the bedtime book. The solutions have all been found. We haven't created anything. There are solutions which are very practical. The 33 billion euros of savings in Europe, a big part goes to the United States. In this at this stage, we should have a different destination for the saving. End up the banking union. There are a lot of barriers, but there are political barriers because we've taken it very far. We're almost there, actually, getting into this union phase. We've got to still take one or two breaks off funds you can find if you need resources or flexibility. Flexibility and to know what you're aiming for. I mean, competitiveness is a resource and not an end in itself. So what is the end that you're aiming for? I mean, the aim is more prosperity and to preserve a model which is a unique one in the world and unique in the history. Where can we find in the world as much freedom, freedom for action, for thoughts, for expression? There are very few places in the world, and we can see that even in the States today, where this freedom is getting reduced more and more. And in Europe, too, we can see that happening. So if we want to preserve our economic, social, and political models, we've got to allow for it. Resources do exist, and we've got to have the agreement with 27 states and with states such as France and Germany gone weaker internally. I mean, this coalition of determination is difficult to reach. Thank you, Joséphine. Resources, determination, and we're going to talk about André Leuze-Groupe-Pietri. Thank you for getting on this very early train this morning. So we might have a little. You are the scientific director of the Joint European Disruptive Initiative, JEDI, so that's quite a good name. You've managed capital investment resources. You've been an entrepreneur, and you were advisor of the Defense Ministry. You took over the head of 6,000 scientists, startup owners coming from 30 European countries. You're at the head, and you want to speed up the leadership in terms of life sciences, space, oceans, and the digital industry. You've got a diploma of HEC. You're a global leader of the economic. I hope that you weren't going to talk about my army force. And you published a tribune which is called For Europe Not to Get Out of History, open letter to the European commissioners. I mean, the question we can ask in the context we're in today, with the figures that I mentioned as an introduction, in this background that you know well, that of defense, innovation, R&D, which are essential for the preparation of our future. Are we at the right time are we in the good timing in Europe? We're out of history. The Americans have launched this year 120 rockets in the space, 1% of market share for the cloud market. Semiconductors, we're out of the more advanced ones, the one that you use on your iPhones, for instance. So the overview, and when I hear the general talking about this ability to recreate ourselves, that's what I would like to talk about out of stink expression. There's only in France and in Europe that we've got this debate where we try to question ourselves and to think about the future. So this is a very positive point. I mean, I don't want to talk about being out of sync. I want to talk about anticipation. In Europe, we've always been, up until 20 or 30 years ago, anticipating things. We understood that democracies were strong, that thanks to the medium classes, we had a good social model. We understood before everybody, 40 years before everybody, that the environmental topic was an important one. The first green ecology parties, etc., much older in Europe than they are in the States. We understood that the diversity was a good thing, and not to please everybody, but truly because it gives us a possibility in a complex world. If you've only got one path for training, for thinking, you won't be able to understand the world you're in. So you need to have this involvement. And we've always been very good in anticipation in Europe. I'm talking under the control of the general, the wars, the conflicts, the fights are never won when you're defending yourself, and that's what we can see in a lot of operational places. We've always been very good in anticipation, and then at one point it stopped. And we curled over ourselves, and we are today the continent. We have become the continent of the strategic surprise. We've been surprised by COVID, and people said, yes, COVID surprised everybody, but in the CIA 2005 report was mentioning it, and Moderna got its first funds to anticipate pandemics in 2014, 700 million euros. There's also a myth on money comes first. No, it's not just money which comes first, it's anticipation and agility. So we were surprised more recently, 2 years ago, by OpenAI. We had a plan of 3 billion euros of the 2018 plan of Cedric Milani. Where is this money? What happened is that we curled up on ourselves, trying to preserve at any cost a model that is overcoming us. You've all seen what happened last week. I mean, we've seen things speeding up, red lines flaring, maybe a country like Romania, which is going to burst. As history is speeding up, one of the points where we could look at the number of data produced in the world now. It's really growing very fast. In the last 15 days, we've got a big difficulty to project ourselves. We have lost this capacity of a vision of why are we doing that. I've lived the other side of the limit, but I encourage people from the private environment to move to the administration, and the same in reverse. We don't always we've lost the ability to project ourselves on the next step. We've got technical measures, we've got an AI plan, but there's no interest in that. Why? To make new drugs, a society which shares information better? Have we recreated public participation because of that? Should we elect somebody on 5 years to deal with education and research, very long-term topics? We should recreate democracy. A European commissioner said democracy is slow by definition. If this is our definition, then we've lost. If we don't recreate, reinvent ourselves, when we cannot recreate ourselves, thinking about what our next objective is, I mean, we're lost. So we realize that high-tech is key for competitiveness, or the big bridge that the AI report shows between Europe and the States are these great gains in productivity and added value given thanks to AI. I mean, we've missed this turn. We realize that high-tech is important in public and administrative domains. The political opinions of young people are built on networks. I mean, geopolitical conflicts. I mean, Ukraine is the most antique struggle, fight in the trenches, and also the use of AI, the shortening of the decision-making time. The opposition between China and the US is technology-based, and if we're not at the forefront. If we do not anticipate, then more and more we're going to be submitted to the way the political opinions are created. Everybody knows why Musk has bought Twitter. And it's obvious. Air France, for those who fly on Air France, only 20% of people in the world have done. Starlink is going to be dealing with our communication mid-2025. Thomas Pesquet, to celebrate Thomas Pesquet to go into space for a Groot Island capsule. I mean, I dream about something different for Europe. I mean, we've lost our step ahead. So we should really shake up. I'm going to quote another Kennedy. In 1962, there was the Cuban crisis, there was the Bixby, there was Sputnik, the creation of this agency, which was a shock for the Americans because of the Russian intercontinental missile being used. And in '62, there was this speech, not in a big hall, but in front of 40,000 people in a stadium in Rice, in a Texas university. We choose to go on the moon by the end of this decade, and he didn't have any idea how we would get there. But in 7 years, this simple, easy to understand project, a source of enthusiasm for people, created thousands of projects in the health, etc. We're going to go on Mars. Yes, but I mean, the projects are not to go on the moon, but can we work on IT models? The big challenge of AI is the energy wall. I mean, Europe has got an energy problem. Can we develop this tool which will revolutionize the world of work? This tool, can we use this information? Can we develop new drugs? We are dealing with energetic transition, but yes, okay, you're green when you use your electric car, but the minories is 10% of the greenhouse effect. Will we replace the extractive industry by a generative industry? So it's this kind of difference we've got to focus on, and I remain an optimistic European or French person. We've got this ability here if we use it well, and if we don't look curl over ourselves. We should be able to see much more clearly what's ahead of us tomorrow. Short question, short answer. In the Draghi, project, 300 billion euros should be given. Is that the solution, or is that because we don't use the money we have? 800 billion, I mean, if we wanted to put a target on Draghi's back, we wouldn't have done any differently. His whole report says that we are wasting or badly using the money that we have already. The problem of the way we operate is to have one plan, 3 billion, another plan, 2 billion. We've used on the plan that we edicted after the COVID, 350 billion. We've only spent 39 billion, but aren't we giving it to anybody? Are we serious in the way we spend the money? 39 project research funded at European level. Is that serious? No, because you don't have to be the boss of the special forces, that if you have a multiplicity of priority, I mean, you don't have a single one. So we've got to anticipate and prioritize. I'm very worried on the political system that we have here with the member states and with the Commission. They react, they take in the blows. I mean, it's Mac Tyson getting older, getting the blows. He's on the ring, okay, but he's not able anymore to respond. So, and that's the kind of pugnacity we should have. I'm not going to turn to Mike Tyson, but towards Jean-Claude Mailly. Jean-Claude, you were, and that's how we know you and recognize you, General Secretary of Force Ouvrière from 2004 to 2018. So you know France and Europe in its social dimension and fragility. We can see that the anger is growing. And as I was saying in my introduction, we are the continent of values, of rights, a protective continent. I mean, what have we missed? I mean, how come we're here? In fact, it's not being out of sync. It's lagging behind on research, on development in Europe. We didn't manage to emancipate ourselves, and we didn't manage to emancipate ourselves from the States. I mean, I'm a European, let's be clear about it, but the construction of Europe, engineers played an important role in the construction of Europe. Jean Monnet is close to the States, and since the creation of Europe, the failure of the European defense community is a big thing. The modality of the broadening of Europe to 27 countries is also to make of Europe a large market, but doing so, it's a big international market, but doing so, we have a weak political and economic force. I mean, this need for emancipation is there, and that's been mentioned by the General and everybody, and all the more so because we're in a world which is fast-growing, fast-moving, talking about the increase of populisms a bit everywhere, the relationship between the States and China, the two major countries in the world. When you see Trump announcing that he would impose custom rights in China, Xi Jinping said it's a mistake because the importance of our relationship is important to both our countries. So faced with USA and China, we're lagging behind again. And imagine, as mentioned by the General, that Trump decides, I don't know what about NATO. What is going to be a possibility for Europe to react? And there is a necessity, according to me, to free ourselves from that. And Europe, based on the way it works, I mean, it's difficult for Europe to make decisions. And any public structure, that's true for Europe, but it's also true for European governments. When it loses power, they edict standards, and we standardize much too much. So in 2026, there's going to be the remuneration guideline, which is going to change a lot in the companies. Europe standardized a lot, and in France, we are the leaders in standardization. So in a fight against competitiveness, we are our worst enemy. Whether to improve on environment matters, yes. I mean, you were talking about the energy situation. I mean, we've got the example today where the battery Swedish factory is bankrupt because we don't have the innovation, we don't have the know-how, and only the Chinese have. So I'm optimistic because I'm a militant, and no matter where you are, if you're a militant, that means that you can contribute to changing things. So I'm optimistic, but we've got to shake up and wake up. And in Europe, as far as this decision-making is concerned, cut down on the standards, have one project. What is worth for Europe is worth for our country. When people can't see what we're heading for, we can see the results on the political field. Josephine mentioned the BRICS meeting. The first one was in 1955, conference in Bandung, and that went on and on. BRICS, even if they don't agree with each other, they've got one objective: to create an alternative system to the Western world, economically, politically, and in an operative manner. Your democracy, look at them, they don't work. We work. So this conflict is there. Europe is a market, but I mean, it has to empower itself and to give itself its power, and they've got to emancipate themselves from the US. You're the vice president of Sinopia, and in Sinopia we work a lot on social democracy, which has been damaged heavily in France. So at the European scale, I mean, social dialogue and social democracy, might that be one way to recreate a dynamic project, to build up the confidence? Could that be the lever to balance at what the politicians are trying to do? Yes. What was the big president of the European Commission? That was Jacques Delors. It's under Jacques Delors' presidency that things have gone forward as far as the Europe is concerned. Then our president didn't see Europe as a priority. I was young at the time, but I took part in that. The Val Duchesse social dialogue, a meeting between the governments, the trade union, the entrepreneurs, and Europe, and we started a project on democratization. I mean, there's been progress done on wages at European level for sure, but I mean, democracy, social democracy is something important, and we've got a president that these last few years has forgotten about it. 4 minutes left to this panel. It's too short a time, but I would like to ask a question to the general. If we wanted to go back to this step ahead we had in Europe, if we had to choose one idea, one initiative to do on the short term, what would you like to suggest for people who try to steer the European boat? Got no doubt that the major added value is education in Europe. We've gone into a big project of transformation of our army. And we've been able to do that because we've got educated staff. You don't have this level of intelligence and determination for promoting the individual in other countries. Education, yes. Josephine, European solidarity. In Europe, we have forgotten why we wanted. We could have solidarity amongst ourselves. Solidarity is a said thing in people's mind or an objective. Solidarity is a sacrifice also. Yes, there's always a sacrifice and a reciprocity. When we agree to commit into a European project to feel solidarity with your partners, we give away a little bit of our sovereignty, and that goes with solidarity. And we will draw something from this participation. Solidarity is an investment, and when we have 500 million inhabitants out of 8 billion, we can't afford the luxury not to have some solidarity, to reinvent and recreate the mid and long term. In our democracy, we've got we pedaling like that. I mean, as far as the short term is concerned, I mean, the political horizon is the next election. I mean, we don't know when it's going to happen in France, but the political schedule is speeding up. So if you're dealing only with the short term, I mean, it doesn't work. A company needs to have a 10-year plan, but not just 3 or 4 months. Army, same thing, a very, very long term, and they have this kind of very long term vision. So we've got to recreate and refocus on the mid and long term. Thank you, Jean-Claude Mailly. André Luxembourg-Pietri, as a conclusion, I think that we've got to be the pugnacious continent. A lot of words, but no action. The Draghi 2023 was published should have been published in June, but shouldn't be able to interact with the elections in Brussels. In November, we're in November, nothing has happened. The time issue, we are in a world where it's not the money that counts, but it's speed. It's the first one who will act, who will decide on the schedule of tomorrow. So if we've got to be sovereign, we've got to impose our pace and our schedule relying on the human being. We've got to be this experimenting continent, trying to build up on this human wealth and responsibility to create the future. We've come to the end of this roundtable. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, there's a path ahead. There's determination, there's youth, there's experience, there's innovation, which is led by one or the other. So let's meet for next panels during this World Forum, and let's get in sync. Thank you very much, all of you.